The Jedi and the Sith are about as opposite as one can get when dealing with alignment and ideals within the Force. In their respective doctrines, there is very little middle ground for either of them to reach, and none of them are more opposed, of course, than the Dark Lord Sidious and the Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker. Greetings again, fellow acolytes of the Force, and welcome back to our archives. Luke's run-in with Sidious left a lasting impact on him and changed the young Jedi forever. Luke experienced what it was like to fight a true foe in his father on Bespin, but the reality of the struggle between the Jedi and the Sith didn't actually become far more real for him until he faced the true evil that was Emperor Palpatine. As bolts of Force lightning coursed through Luke's body, he was closer to death than he had ever been, and only then did he realize the true horrors of the dark side. Luke called it an abomination, and from that day forth, we continuously see Luke's very sharp criticisms of all things pertaining to the dark side, and especially of everything that Sidious did. However, in none other than the Book of the Sith, we learn of something very specific which happened to be the only thing that Luke and Sidious agreed upon. And interestingly enough, this critical agreement comes from the form of none other than Darth Plagueis. So my friends, sit with us today as we open up yet another holocron and dive into the crumbling pages of the Book of the Sith, and identify what Luke and Sidious thought about Plagueis' take on the Force. Throughout the entirety of the book, we continuously see Master Luke Skywalker and Darth Sidious' comments scrawled in the margins of the page, usually giving their opinion about something mentioned by the original author, adding updated information to the book, or even making comments on someone else's comments also written within the margins. For most of the book, Luke is very critical of the Sith, constantly picking apart their arguments about the power of the dark side, and dismantling the notion that the dark side offers anything substantial. Luke even at one point mentioned that to give into the dark side was to completely give up on hope, and he genuinely didn't understand why people bothered with it at all. Among Luke's harshest critiques would be everything he would say towards Darth Bane's philosophies and the ideologies of the Force. Along the same lines, we would also see the comments of Darth Sidious, who usually provided additional information not listed by the original author, and also provided some of his opinions and critiques upon the subject matter. However, of all of the chapters in the entire Book of the Sith Sidious would ever comment on, the research notes of Darth Plagueis the Wise held the most controversial opinions by the Emperor. We see in many cases where Darth Sidious agrees with his former master's ambitions, but disapproves of Plagueis' penchant for trying to overanalyze the Force, with at one point Sidious outright saying, "I do not share my former master's enthusiasm for process. I care only for results." This is an entirely understandable comment, as Plagueis was a scientist first and a Sith second. It would be in this very chapter that the opinions of Luke and Sidious about Plagueis would align, as they would both harshly refute Plagueis' claims that the Force was not as mysterious or alive as anyone thought. Let's take a look. During his chapter, Plagueis goes through strenuous detail explaining the life and function of a midi-chlorian, breaking down how they work and operate, and how the Force is channeled into living beings through them. Neither Luke nor Sidious really care much for all this midi-chlorian talk, with Sidious frankly stating that although he was impressed with the results of Plagueis' work, he did not understand his master's fascination with it, and it is where here Luke chimes in. The entire focus on midi-chlorians is misguided. They are a natural lesson in symbiosis. When we listen to the smallest creatures, they open us to the expanse of the Force. Only a Sith would seek to dismantle a relationship that benefits both parties. Sidious then echoes this sentiment with this statement: "The writing of my master betray his narrow focus. In his obsession to unlock life's secrets, he's proved blind to immediate threats." It is here where Sidious and Luke have the same opinion, that focusing on the midi-chlorians was misguided, and focusing down on the minute and microscopic details of the Force blinds one to the bigger picture. They both agree that this narrow vision of Darth Plagueis made him weak, the first thing in the entire book that they agree on. Luke and Sidious gain power in the Force by looking outside of themselves. Sidious, over the course of the Clone Wars and in his empire, reaped the benefits of others' work. Sidious was always focused on the grand scale. He cared not for creating anything new. He only wanted to use what was proven to be effective and spin it in his own new way. This is where his fascination with superweapons stems. Another example is when Darth Sidious found Darth Scabarus's knowledge of necromancy. He gave it to Imperial scientists to craft a bioweapon, using some of Plagueis' own knowledge for various scientists in the Empire. For Sidious, knowledge was power, and it was important to gather as much of it as possible. Drawing a focus so narrow, according to Sidious, would basically be emulating the Jedi's dogmatic way of thinking, gathering their knowledge only from their own echo chamber. When it came to Luke, he was forced to gather his knowledge and wisdom from multiple sources. After the fall of the Empire, Luke spent the majority of his time scouring the edges of the galaxy for any scrap of information pertaining to the Force or the Jedi at all. This is in fact how he came into the possession of the Book of the Sith in the first place. Luke knew the pieces of the book and the information that needed to be left alone, but he still gleaned much information from it. He acknowledged the Force as larger than anyone could possibly imagine. He had seen both his Jedi Masters transcend the physical plane. As he quoted here, "I've seen Yoda, Ben, and my father return from death." The Force is a welcoming place, a place far larger than Darth Plagueis attempts to measure and minimize it. Going along with this though, both Luke and Darth Sidious believed that there was life after death, with Darth Plagueis strongly refuting this. In fact, Plagueis even states that he believes that Sith spirits aren't real and that there is no life following death, revealing that this is why he was obsessed with eternal life. But again, both Sidious and Luke make comments right beside one another. Luke mentions the netherworld of the Force, and Sidious mentions the Naboo legend of chaos. But pertaining to the Sith spirits, Luke would say this: "Anyone who dismisses the existence of Sith spirits has never fought one. It took every Jedi in my academy to defeat the spirit of Exar Kun." And next to this, Sidious wrote, "The spirits of Korriban are quite real. Indeed, on one occasion, they nearly killed me." Earlier in the book, in the Jedi Code, Darth Sidious underlined the final line, "There is no death, there is the Force," and admitted that this is the only line in the Jedi Code that contained truth. But what's more important is Sidious is not the only Sith to carry this opinion. Darth Maul, Darth Bane, and many other Sith all in one way or another mentioned or alluded to the fact that this line of the Jedi Code is something that they agreed upon. Unsurprisingly, it would be on this topic that Luke would concede to agreeing with Sidious on, both of them turning their accusations onto Plagueis, who refuted the idea that the Force wasn't as large as many thought. The conclusions that the two of them drew came down to Sidious believing that Plagueis was blind, and that Luke said he didn't think that the Force ever felt compelled to speak to Plagueis. And with that, they both agreed that as both a Jedi and a Sith, as wielders of the Force, Darth Plagueis was a failure. But anyway, my friends and acolytes, let us know what you think about this interesting piece of the lore. And as far as we can tell, the only thing that Luke and Sidious agreed upon. As always, my friends, may the Force be with you, and have a great day.